Welcome to the Bayou Culture Gathering. Let's see if I can get this going here. Today, we're really excited to have with us Chef Melissa Martin, who has written an amazing cookbook, The Mosquito Supper Club, Cajun Recipes from a Disappearing Bayou. We're going to hear from her in just a minute. I'd like to thank and introduce our management team to you. There's myself, Maida, Rachel, and Gary, who bring this program to you each month. This is sort of the disclaimer slide for us because we're here to have some of those difficult conversations, but we don't support one adaptation or management strategy in particular. We're here to start those conversations and try to find ways that we can maintain our cultural identity and stay tethered to that identity as we face some really tough issues. Big thanks to our partners, Folklife in Louisiana, that's Maida with the Division of the Arts over there, the Discovery Center, Louisiana Folklore Society, Center for Bayou Studies at Nicholls State, and Center for Louisiana Studies at UL. So thank you to these organizations for helping to bring this to you. And also, we have to thank our funders, the National Endowment for the Arts, Louisiana Division of the Arts, Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, BETNEP, and the M.J. Sindler Family Fund. So we appreciate all of that. Could not bring this program to you without that support. We also, unfortunately, we don't have Maida with us today. She would normally talk about this section of the Passing It On workshops that the Louisiana Folklife program funds. It is basically workshops with tradition bearers who are able to pass that tradition on to people who are interested in learning more about it. If you or have a tradition or know someone with a tradition that would like to pass that on, please contact Maida. Her information is there. We'd also like to highlight this particular Passing It On workshop with Mr. Henry Watson and his apprentice, Carrie Williams, who's doing this 3D carving in Livonia. And there is in the chat a link to more information about this if you would like to learn more how to get involved with that. So this is sort of a rundown of the agenda that we're doing today. Up next, we're going to be speaking with Chef Melissa Martin. We're going to have a space where you can ask her questions and a little bit of a discussion. We'll ask Melissa what her hope for the coast is, and then we'll share some information about the working groups and how you can participate with them. If anyone has any announcements that they would like to share with the group, they can do so then. And then the formal part of the presentation will end at 1 o'clock. And then we'll stick around for another 30 minutes for informal discussion. So with that, I am really honored and excited to introduce to all of you Chef Melissa Martin, who has written an amazing, amazing cookbook. And I'll share some of these quotes with, well, let me read them and then I'll speak from my heart. Mosquito Supper Club is more than a cookbook. It's like a manual in how to be a Cajun. Step-by-step photos show how to make a roux, shuck an oyster, or peel a crawfish. In the book, Martin documents not just a kitchen, but a whole culture. With Mosquito Supper Club, Melissa Martin opens the door into the savory scented kitchens of mothers, aunts, and sisters. She reveals a whole world that is rich and complicated, a way of life that is sustaining and unique. And she also mourns what we have already lost and stand to lose yet in this endangered region and culture. And finally, Mosquito Supper Club is here to try to prevent the region's Cajun cooking from slowly disappearing. Martin's as much of a teacher as she is a cook. There's barely a recipe in here that doesn't have an extra paragraph of information or ingredient sourcing, prepping, and serving. And so those of you who know me know that I'm a crier. I cry easily. And I mean, my recent cry, I think, was for the last Ghostbusters movie, the Ghostbusters Afterlife or whatever. I cried at the end of that. And I was like, man, come on, Jonathan, pull it together. I cried throughout this cookbook, and I have to say, like, what an amazing work. And I have never cried. A cookbook has never made me cry before. And so, Melissa, you have created something absolutely beautiful. And in a conversation I had with Gary yesterday, you're doing what this group is working to do. It's about documenting what is there and allowing people, should they have to move and migrate out of harm's way. This is something that goes in the trunk of traditions that we've talked about before. This book is coming with me, should I have to go anywhere else, because it keeps me tethered to my cultural identity. And I thank you so very much personally for make creating this. So with all of that, y'all didn't come to listen to me talk. Melissa, I hand the microphone to you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Is my audio on?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that warm welcome, Jonathan. There's a couple of different things I want to say about the cookbook, I guess, because we're starting there. I guess one of the things that I did whenever I started Mosquito Supper Club as a restaurant is I just started curating what I loved about the culture that I grew up with. I wanted to offer people, when I came to New Orleans, who would ask me, where can I get Cajun food? And I would say, well, do you have, somebody's house you can go to? Because the best Cajun food is tucked behind doors. Same thing with Creole food. Same thing with almost any ethnic peasant food. It is in people's kitchens, and that's where you want to have it because that's the best of it. Once it makes its way to the restaurant, it adjusts, and it has to evolve in a certain way to keep the public interested, you know. And so when I started Mosquito Supper Club as a restaurant, it was very, very much roots cooking. And I was very much learning how to cook the food as I went, And so I didn't quite know how to cook the food that I grew up eating, but I definitely was on a mission to learn it and to learn it exactly how I ate it growing up. So really get like the ABC foundations, so that then I could share it with the world. And in that process, I could document it. And I documented a lot of it, and I created a lot of the recipes from the flavor that I remembered from childhood. So I think that I've built my career on nostalgia, I say. And I think that that is important for me. So then I also did a huge deep dive where I lived with my parents for 3 months. And I spent a lot of time on the bayou, but I literally lived there 3 different times in the year to really feel what it felt like growing up on the bayou, and steep myself into it, And one of the things that's really interesting is that there's not a lot of recipes. It's a rotation of the same foods over and over again. And that may make a book seem not so interesting. But if you want to write the truth, and if you want to write about a culture, you have to, you have to put down exactly what was happening. And I was able to work with my mom and her sisters and people in the bayou to be able to pull this book together. And I'm very honest in the head notes when it's not something that I ate growing up. This is not something I ate growing up. Never. I mean, like, in my new book, I have a lump crab salad, and I'm like, no Cajun ever set out to make a lump crab salad, ever. Although you see them all over, you know, um, menus and stuff like that. The other thing is that whenever you're trying to write a culture, I very much try to, throughout the whole book, say, this is my experience. This is an experience of a person that left Chauvin, Louisiana when they were 18 years old and has not ever returned back to live. I go to Chauvin, multiple times a month. I buy seafood from the Bayou regions. But it's a huge risk to write a book about being Cajun. And of course, the worst fear was that Cajuns would be mad about this book. And I think that one of the ways that made me feel okay is that whenever we were shooting this book, we had a room. Every picture you take whenever you're creating a cookbook, you tape up on the wall. So you have a wall with all the pictures of the book, so you can move them around, and you try not to be too repetitious. And my mother cooked a lot of the food that we shot for this book, so she didn't get a food stylist or a credit, but she definitely cooked a lot of the food. Those people get paid like $1,700 a day, so she really got ripped off. But she I can't hear you guys, by the way. Y'all muted? Okay, cool. I just see Jonathan laughing, but no sound. That's scary.
No, I'm muted because I don't want
Okay, no,
to
that's
distract
fine. Just
everybody
making
else
sure.
while I'm laughing over here.
Yeah. But she came to New Orleans to drop off ice chests of food, and my food photographer was like, I've never seen so much beautiful food coming out of plastic containers before. But she came to drop off the food for one day of the shoot, and we had half of the book's pictures on the wall, and she was with my nanny, my Aunt Brenda Lirette, who has passed away since. And they both were like she said, my nanny said, "Oh, Maxine, it feels like home," And I think that was like our, okay, we're doing okay, we're doing a great job, because every single thing you write, every single thing you shoot, you're trying to like hold on to something, and you're trying to show something. And you're trying to show it as honest as possible, and you're trying to change a perception. And one of the perceptions I was trying to change worldwide is that Cajuns are a sophisticated culture. If you look at a place like the Basque Country, you look at all these places in Sicily and Spain and France, all these places that people seek to go to for food, and that has these sort of like fairy tales, sing song ideas, and this just sophisticated ideas because they're in Europe. Um, and that's exactly what we have down the bayou. We have our own language that's like Castilian, or Colonians language. And we, in the public, commercially, they never want to portray us that way. And so anytime I've been offered to do a TV show, and I've been offered lots of TV shows and lots of different documentaries, they always want to portray something that's very cookie cutter commercial. And that's something that I would never, ever agree to. And it's always like, well, do you know somebody who shrimps who looks like this, and it's really disturbing, And so with this book, I wanted to spread a worldwide message that this was an Eden of resources. This is a sophisticated culture. These are sophisticated people. These are people that understood sustainability as a just natural part of them, and created, a culture together that is recognized worldwide. The word Cajun is used over and over and over. If you write a cookbook and you're not from Louisiana and you put Cajun in front of something, I am very upset. Because we cannot be quantified like that. And so I think that that was one of my biggest motivators in the book, not only to keep a historical record, but to present the culture, the place, in a way that showed us as sophisticated, educated people, when maybe not be educated in one way, but we're certainly educated in another way, and in ways that will forever be lost, one day at a time. And I think we did, you know, I think that when we won the ISDP Cookbook of the Year, and I accepted the award for that, I said, and it was a really shaky time because it was post IDA. I said, I wanted to put Chauvin on the map. And I think we did, and the book also won a James Beard Award. So again, it's like we're putting this like American culture on the map. I was invited to speak in Amsterdam at City Labs, just had this incredible opportunity to talk about water on a worldwide stage with just all these artists that I admired and writers and all of these incredible people. I didn't realize how lucky I was. So I was actually there. And I've been able to spread, you know, spread sort of the Cajun Bible. And I've been able to, like Jonathan was just saying, people who are Cajuns in exile because they're in New York or they're in LA or they're in Germany or whatever, they are able to come back home with this book and they are saying, finally, somebody wrote it the way it was. It's like one of the things the publisher wants you to do is like create like a Cajun holiday meal. And it's like, we eat the same things, like add in a dry turkey, and then everything else is, sort of the same and very repetitious. And so that's what we did with this book. We tried to, I always say we tried to dispel myths, dispel myths of what people believe and what is the actual reality. And so that's what I'm continuing to do. It sometimes people don't want to create something because they're like, well, it's already been done. But people receive information many different ways. People receive information by reading books, newspapers, they receive it from social media, they receive it from documentaries, they receive it from podcasts. And so you can never be like, oh, well, everybody's going to get this information because it's on this. People receive information different ways. When people are sitting in my restaurant, they can receive the story and the information through food. And then with this book, they receive the information in a different way. And I will continue to sort of spread that word and continue to be representative of the culture and continue to dispel myths and continue to try to document, I guess, the nostalgia, but also what still remains in a place that I think is, quite unique and romantic and I still like absolutely love. I mean, every time I go down the bayou, I just went recently. I got to do something that was kind of like a dream. I was able to cook a dinner for 12 women from around the world who came down to Cocodrie. They were treated to a bayou tour by my dad and a crabber that I'm friends with named Lebron, Daryl Lebron. And so they all got on a crab boat and they were brought down the bayou to a camp where I then was there waiting for them with shucked oysters. And I did this like beautiful meal for them, which has, and it was arranged by somebody else. It was arranged by a group called Wild Terrains. And it was just sort of one of my dreams to be able to cook for people at the source, where it all began and be able to talk about all the things about that place, everything from the gentrification, to disasters and, all the different intricate puzzle pieces of a place like Cocodrie, Louisiana. I actually spoke to them as soon as they turned onto Highway 56. I started speaking to them and I read from my new book to them. And then as soon as they crossed over the Robinson Canal Bridge, which is sort of the bridge to Cocodrie, from Cocodrie and Chauvin, I explained to them that now the house prices have more than tripled, So if you're on this side of the bridge, you have a $95,000 house. You put that house on the other side of the bridge, it's almost 700 or something, 350 to 700,000. And so it's, those things are important that people get. You don't want to just drop them into this place and say, oh, and make it real touristy. You really want to like show what's happening in this place. And, I mean, Cocodrie is very much cleaned up comparatively to what it was a couple of years ago. But it still was quite an amazing experience. And I mean, I guess it was in a way just, really the environmental tourism. But it still was one of my dreams to feed people in Cocodrie. And then because someone else took care of it, Wild Terrains took care of it, then I didn't have to worry about all the people that drank too much. They just got on a bus and went back to New Orleans. So for liability for me, that's like super great. I couldn't have arranged it myself. I needed somebody else to make all those other pieces happen. Anyway.
You talked a little bit about Hurricane Ida, and one of the things that I wanted to share with this group was it was largely through your efforts that the Helio Foundation was able to raise over $1 million to help the people recover. And most of that money went to commercial fishermen. We were able to give $5,000 to each commercial fisherman that had the commercial fishing license and can prove that there was a loss. Because look, I mean, shrimp boats were in the marsh. The rigging and net was torn to nothing. Crab traps were just gone, you know? And for these folks to um, begin working again and trying to earn the money that they would need to repair their homes, this was a life source for them. And so, first of all, thank you for your help in making that happen, because you have name recognition. You sold how many copies of Mosquito Supper Club? Like how many?
Like
About
100,000.
it's not like 100,000. And so with that,
At Cecil's and Coquetry. No, I'm just joking.
um,
It's
so
still more than that, but on paper,
yeah,
that's how much it's sold. And
it's
you
amazing.
know, one of the things about the fundraising for Ida, which was good for me, is that there's a part of commercialism that I have a Cajun restaurant, and I am trying to support myself and support many families that work at the restaurant and support farmers and fishermen that I buy from. But in the end, it is a capitalist, business, that I am using my how I grew up and using my culture to make this space. And in that, this space is for the public to come in and really get to steep themselves in something that I consider Cajun. Um, and so there's a conflict of interest there for me as a person. There's always like a conflict of interest of how much you get to share and how much you give away, and then what you give away, how much then is left for you, you know? And so whenever Hurricane Ida hit and I went down to see my parents and I evacuated them. But then when we came back, we went to just get them some basics, gas and water. They were not going to leave, even though they had no running water or electricity. So we, established them with a couple of basics, and then we realized we couldn't stay. And one of the reasons why I said we couldn't stay is because I was like, there's no way I can help here. I don't have the resources to help here. What I do have the resources to do is to try to help on a much larger level. And in that was this great symbiosis between the social media presence that I had created on showing this side of Cajun culture that I love. I mean, my Instagram is just basically like a museum of pictures to my culture, um, and then my great love of helping people. And so whenever I left Chauvin and I drove to North Carolina, and sometime in the drive between Chauvin and North Carolina, I just had this idea, and I think I called Jonathan and I said, I can raise money. The money has to go somewhere. It can't come to me. I don't have a 501(c)(3). And then I just made a GoFundMe. And then I immediately took it down because I was like, I cannot do this. I can't put myself out there in this way. I'm embarrassed to ask for money. I know Louisiana has paid it forward. I know the resources we use for the whole country. I know what the oil field has done. I know all these things, but I can't do it myself. I'm embarrassed. And then I said, an expletive word, and then I said, just do it. What harm can be done? People can, what harm can be done at this point? And then what ensued after that was so many different people who I didn't even know were my friends, or I didn't even know were partners of Mosquito, came through to really catapult this grassroots campaign that just became something other than what I created. It was the people's campaign, and we were able to raise an incredible amount of money. I remember I was telling Jonathan before we started speaking that it took an incredible personal toll on me. It took me probably like, I'm not a person that likes to be on my phone all the time. And I was on my phone almost 24/7. It was really hard to even just sleep and trying to coordinate it, the ups and downs of it, having to hand out money in cash. Everybody thought I was on the bayou and I wasn't. And I have to say, we were kind of like holding up that illusion, for a little bit. I told people I was in North Carolina at a cabin, sitting in the hot tub. I don't think they would have liked it. But it was very, very difficult. And I don't think my body stopped rattling for probably a year after. It took that long to recover from the work that we did. You wonder like how people handle it who are humanitarians year round for all the different things that are happening in the world. It's quite scary, but it was really purposeful for me to have this brand that I created do something good. Not that I don't think it's doing something good as a book or as a restaurant, but it was really nice to be able to have that moment in time where we were able to make it happen. I don't know if we could ever make that moment happen again, but in that moment, everything worked. And so that was, super nice.
It was sort of like
Because
Lanya
you don't know, yeah, you don't know why you're creating something and you don't know when it's going to be in the perfect moment in time to make a huge difference. And so, you just have to have the impetus to like jump, just do it, and then let the pieces fall.
Yeah, like that's what I was saying. Lanya will never be recreated again.
Mm-mm.
As much as anybody would try, it was just a magic time in Chauvin. When you go back to Chauvin now, post Ida, what's your feeling when things have been cleaned up, Upper Little Caillou no longer exists, as
Yeah.
you're driving through the community, um, how do you feel?
Well, I mean, when I leave my street where my parents have lived for over 54 years, and I grew up there in the same house for 18 years, um, we have a whole new view. When I get to Highway 56 and I turn right or left, there's nothing guard in my view of the bayou. And so I see the bayou now, and beyond that, I see all trees, and I know beyond those trees is water. So my actual like markers have changed of like what I would say, oh, I look here and this is where I turn, or whatever. Like the markers have changed. And I think like those markers are so like nostalgic to what you think home is. And so I think home for me has been very much redefined since Ida, and it feels a lot more um not transient. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it seems that it's almost like water. It's just sort of ebbing and flowing. The idea of home is sort of changing over and over. Um, and so it's quite a different feeling of actual home. I mean, I still go there and I still feel a certain way in my mother's kitchen, but the infrastructure and the place itself has, changed visually so much. I mean, you can't even imagine a time where we wouldn't have schools, in the bayou. And so that's really hard. It's almost like losing Lagniappe on the bayou is almost like, okay, so now these things have been stripped too, so it's kind of like a culture that's been stripped away in so many ways. And you're like, okay, there's like a trunk left, but hey, hopefully we'll grow more branches or, evolve in a way, but it's quite difficult.
What do you think that evolution look? And this is my last question, and then I'd like to go into your new book. But what do you think the evolution of Chauvin looks like? Like, do you think like eventually it becomes cocodrie and like the line moves up, and then your parents' house is now valued at $750,000 because
The house,
of
the
course,
house across the street for them to sale right now
yeah.
might be the best investment. Um, I wish I had an answer for that, you
Yeah.
know. I think cocodrie will stay cocodrie. I think the people that can afford camps in cocodrie don't need to pay insurance, and so they can get around that. And if it gets destroyed, they can either rebuild or not worry about it, And so I think we're seeing a time where less people who actually are the sort of heart and soul of coquetry are around. And then, yeah, I guess I mean, when they built that neighborhood right before the Robinson Canal Bridge on the left-hand side, when you're going down the bayou, I think that was kind of like a flag, like, oh, wow, those are like camps.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that if there's no school for people to send their kids to, then the community is going to shrink. I already know people who have put their houses for sale because they're not going to drive 45 minutes to take their kids to school back and forth. So I definitely see a huge change. Although the Piggly Wiggly is not the Piggly Wiggly anymore. It's back to Claymont. So, there's like,
Which makes me really excited, by the way.
I know they got their name back.
Yeah,
Although we all embraced and love the pig.
sure.
Um, there's things that were so important to us that we didn't think we could live without on the bayou, our snowball stand and Miss May, that we now have like adjusted to. So I'm not quite sure. I think that if I was living there, I might have a better answer. But
Yeah.
also if I was living there, I might not have a better answer.
I know. I know.
So I'm like looking into it, from an outsider's view, even though it's my hometown.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to the exciting stuff. I mean, it's all exciting stuff, but let's talk about the new book. And one of the things, if you can share, and I love the way that your first book was sectioned off into like, here's shrimp, here's oysters, here's crawfish. But I guess if we can start with the new book and talking about the structure of it, and if you have any images of it that you could share with us, that would be cool too.
Yeah. So the first book, the reason why I structured it like by shrimp, by oyster, by crab, is because I really wanted to talk about the industry and having people understand the industry so they can understand why things cost a certain amount of money and they can understand why they should be paying more for things. Um, and to see the people behind those industries, and why you should ask where your seafood's from and why you should support domestic seafood. So all of those things. And yes, I talked a lot about life in Chauvin and a lot about feelings and a lot about sort of the romance that I feel about a kitchen in Chauvin. And so when I wanted to write a second book, my publishers were like, do you want to do a Cajun like anthology, like a John False? And I was like, no. I mean, if you want me to work on something for 10 years, then, that's a lot of research. That's a team of people. That's not just me, that's going into communities, that's interviewing, documenting. And I'm not saying that I'm not up for that challenge. I just wasn't up for that challenge then. And so I had this very sort of like esoteric idea to follow a year on the bayou and not just like Bayou Chauvin-Terrebonne Parish, but the Bayou communities in what is Cajun country, so like the apex of Cajun country. And I really wanted to think about like how I felt throughout that year and what were the themes of that? Like what were the themes or the feelings, or if I could quantify it, this is, the age of Aquarius, whatever, So I and I wanted to write stories again, like I do in the first book, and I wanted to write stories that I thought would immediately, get like the big X, because a lot of them do. And I thought the way to do that was to break it up by themes. And so the book starts in the beginning of the year, which is Epiphany. So right after our New Year's, we have Epiphany, which is the start of the Mardi Gras season, which is actually the start of the time before Fat Tuesday, which then is Ash Wednesday, which then goes into Lent. We're from a very like Catholic culture. And so, our first part of the year is abundance. This is when you can be eating crawfish, crabs, shrimp, oysters, Finfish, you can get it all. This is like the king's table. It's Mardi Gras, everything goes. So I started that way with abundance. Then after abundance, we move into simplicity in this like time of Lent. I do poke fun at the culture, on Good Friday, everybody doesn't eat meat, so we eat a lot of seafood. So it's not like we are, you know, um, really suffering here, you know, the way we should be. And so simplicity, we follow through Lent, we make it through the blessing of the fleet, and then we move into the time of the year that I call warmth. I think I equate us in the end of August to Cooking Pot by Morris Sendak. I'll be so hot, I'm a cooking pot. Because for us in South Louisiana, the time of warmth is like a snow season in the north when people leave because it's so cold for so long. For us, it's we're so hot for so long. It's a mind game with yourself. But in that time, also, it's just like an abundant time of so much good things to eat. Crabs, crabs, crabs. Crabs are free in that time. And so we have warmth, we move through resilience, we move, which is the end of our hurricane season, how one day you're eating watermelon, the next day you're packing everything up, and abandoning your life for a little while, not knowing what's going to go on. So how were Cajuns resilient throughout time? How are we resilient and able to handle it, resilience to traditions. We really see a lot of our traditions in the fall. Hunting, we start with alligator season, all of our hunting seasons, what is normal, what is natural for people in that time. I equate hunting and fishing as important as picking up milk on like a weekly basis, So from that time we go to love. That's the holiday season. And I took some real risks there, and I wrote about a Cajun funeral, and my publishers let me publish that. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think that it's important how we take care of people still, and it's important just to put down the moments that happen in these times where someone you love is in hospice, and the way a family gets brought together, and last moments and things like that. So we have a piece in the love section called Cajun Farewell. We have a piece about the holidays, which is, sort of that bittersweet time of the year. I think I called it like the metamorphosis of the soul, when you go into the holiday season, you're kind of in a cocoon, and because the holidays are hard for everyone. You you can't experience like you did as a child, so it's not necessarily the easiest time of year for everyone. But luckily you become a butterfly, and then it's Epiphany again, and you get to like shake it out at Mardi Gras, and so, and then I also have one chapter which is I think, is that the resilience chapter? Yeah, Grace is our hurricane season, but the resilience chapter is dedicated solely to the onion, which I love very much. And I think I wrote 7,000 words about the onion when I was on vacation in Iceland one time, and I think the piece has been cut down to maybe 300. So I have a lot to say about onions, but we only have so much space in the book. But I'm going to share with you guys the cover. I think I talked at the beginning about commercialization, and when I wrote this book, the name of the book was Communion. So if you read this book, you'll see the themes of communion sort of weaved throughout the whole book, but the name Communion was not selling. And so in the 11th hour, we had to create a whole new cover. And now the book is named Bayou, which is fine because pretty much in every story and every head note, I talk about the Bayou. I consider myself a Bayou girl. I'm not a prairie Cajun. I'm definitely a Bayou Cajun or a marsh Cajun. We have some beautiful woodcut prints by Pippin Frisbee Calder. She did a lot of like beautiful drawings. That's a magnolite on the spine. So it's pretty exciting. We have a redfish too. And so I'm definitely proud of this book. And even though you have to make concessions for a publisher, and because they want the book to sell, I think that it is going to be just a continuation of the first book, just told from a different like perspective.
I'm really
Yeah,
excited. I'm really excited about it. When is it? When can we get it?
September 24th.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm
You'll
looking.
need it because it's an election year.
For
Do something homey with your
Do
time.
you have anywhere you mix drinks? Like I may need you to make a cookbook
Do
on how to
not.
mix a good grasshopper or something like that for
No,
like
I mean, we we have like a group of drinks that we call Ward 7 Wedding. And but it's not
I
worth it
like
to
it.
not worth it to put them in a book. They're
Uh,
not that good.
I like it. I like it.
Yes.
So if we could now, I'll open it up to questions from the audience. We've got about 15 minutes before we have to wrap up the formal part of this, but then Melissa will be able to stick around a few minutes after. So if you're not able to ask your question now, you can ask it later. So if you do have a question or would like to ask anything to Melissa, if you could virtually raise your hand so that we can see you, then we can recognize you. Dr. LaFleur.
Hey, Melissa, thanks for sharing that. That was a beautiful talk. I was wondering, since you've been presenting these stories about Chauvin, how often you're hearing from other people, maybe on the Gulf Coast or other coasts, are they saying this is exactly what's happening to my town too? Or do they look at you like, oh, that's a rare thing?
No, I mean, I think as I'm sharing the story, I'm learning more about what's happening. And I certainly learned a lot from Dr. Alex Polker in Lumcombe and watched him speak. I think I watched him speak in Morocco last and different places. Obviously, Dakar. I've learned about sort of the symbiosis of what's happening in Dakar and, how it's so close to what's happening here and how they're culture and their tourism and everything is being affected almost in the same way here. They're fishing. I think that when I've spoken like on, I would say elevated stages, so like city labs, I think that what I'm able to give people is like a local perspective. So, like, what does this actually mean? It means that, my dad fishes every day to feed the family, not only feed my mom, but feed my aunts and uncles and things like that. And it's so we're taking away like an actual food supply, little by little. I mean, we're already taking it away with regulations, which I did write to our state multiple times, asking them to grandfather in senior citizens in the old fishing numbers of how much you can catch. But nobody listened to me because this is how people eat. This is how they feed themselves. I think people still don't get it. When you take somebody down to Cocodrie and you show them the marsh, they're like, wow, it's so beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And I can tell them this used to be sugarcane. It's still hard for them to understand it. What land loss, what coastal erosion, what melting icebergs actually mean, you know? Um, and so I haven't had anyone that's been relatable except for the people that I am acquaintances of in Dakar, where we have talked about like the similarities. I've of course spoken to a lot of people where water is an issue, and that's what the main brunt of the talk was in Amsterdam. And the funny part is that some people have too much water, some people don't have enough, you know. And so I'm like, well, we move oil all over. Why can't we move our water to somewhere else? Move the water we don't need to like this drought area. But I guess water is expensive to move.
One of the things that we always ask our presenter is, what is your hope for the coast? And we invite anyone on the Zoom call to share in the chat what your hope for the coast might be. But we'd like to hear from you, Melissa. What's your hope for the coast?
My hope is that people are able to visit and experience a little bit of what is left of our coast and see it, like get a glimpse of it for in its reality, for all it's worth. I mean, whether that's going to the boat blessing or whether that's spending a weekend somewhere, I want people to experience it as it changes rapidly. So I guess mine is more like from a human perspective than from, I mean, my hope for the coast is that all these diversions, build up land and we reverse some of the sort of irreplaceable um, pieces,
Yeah.
I want Timberlake Island back.
Yeah.
I'll take that whole 5-island chain and I
Yeah.
want to go there and I want to picnic like when I was a kid, I think that is would be an incredible thing, but more than anything else, those islands protect the coast. So you want to see some sort of revitalization and some sort of protection for
Yeah.
people to be able to then still consider living there and still consider trying to keep evolving the culture on the bayou.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
And thank you for being with us, Melissa. Again, if you, I see a hand up. If you don't mind just sticking around, we're gonna wrap up the formal part of the presentation, and then we'll be able to talk to Melissa a little bit longer. As you all know, we have a position statement for the Bayou Culture Collaborative. We encourage everyone to sign on. You can use that QR code right there to get to it, or visit louisianafolklore.org. As we mentioned earlier, there are working groups that you can attend those meetings. These are a list of all of those working groups, as well as the dates and times of the next meeting. You can also go to louisianafolklore.org to find more information about how to join those. If any of the conveners are in the group today and have any announcements, we invite you to make those announcements at the end of the presentation. Next month's gathering, we invite you. It's Friday, May 24th at noon. We're working with CPEX, the Center for Planning Excellence, to revisit a symposium that was done a few years ago called Rising Above. And we will have a few of the participants from that symposium sort of taking a look back at the things that they've said a few years ago and reflecting on the reality of where we are today on that. So we hope that you'll join us then. And so that brings us to the section of announcements. If anyone has anything they would like to share with the group before we go to the informal part of the presentation, if you just raise your hand virtually to be recognized, and if not, we can move on. All right, great. So that concludes the formal part of this presentation. Again, thank you so much to Chef Melissa Martin for being with us today, and we hope that you will join us again in May for the next BCC. Yeah.
Jonathan, can you go forward a slide, please?
Oh, not so fast. Sorry, I thought that was the last slide. So we have the community-driven relocation report. And so that is from the National Academy of Science. And so there's more information about this report that's going to be in the chat link. So if you'd like to get information about that, you can do so there. Ha, this is the last slide. So stick around. Yeah, sure. We'd like for you guys to stay with us until about 1:30. Here's more information about ways that you can connect to the work that we do at louisianafolklore.org, Facebook, Instagram, all those wonderful things. And that, my friends, now concludes the formal part of this presentation.